This is the FETTEC G4 flight controller, and today I'm going to wire it up. I'm going to show you how to wire it up, and I'm going to put it in my quadcopter. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. Now, I'm going to be working off of this excellent manual created by FETTEC for the flight controller. It is super comprehensive, and frankly, if you're the kind of person who's wired up a flight controller before, you can probably figure out everything you need to know from that manual. But since you're here watching the video, you probably also will enjoy if I take you through it. So let's do it together. And the place I like to start is with the ESC. And if you are using a FETTEC flight controller and a FETTEC ESC, then you simply plug them together using a straight through plug. Nothing could be simpler. But I'm not going to make my life simple like that. I'm actually putting this flight controller in one of my perfect freestyle build quadcopters. So if you are using a FETTEC ESC, go down to the timeline where I've got chapter markers, or go to the video description where I've got timestamps, and you can skip to the next chapter. But for those of you who, like me, are using this with a BLHeli ESC, here's how to figure out what the wiring should be. And the easiest place to start is with ground and VBAT, which just are how every ESC is going to output ground and VBAT pretty much. And those are going to go to the VCC, and ground is going to go to one of these two grounds. Don't let the fact that there are two grounds confuse you. They are completely interchangeable, and frankly, I'm not entirely sure why they put two. Sometimes people think that's necessary, though. You can pick whichever one you like. For the motor outputs, we are going to be using motor 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the BLHeli ESC, and they are going to go to signal 1, 2, 3, 4 on the FETTEC flight controller. I'm not even going to draw the lines. Like, it's just, that's just 1, 2, 3, 4 goes to 1, 2, 3, 4. There is also the one wire signal input, which if you're using a FETTEC ESC, is a way to carry all of the motor signals over one wire instead of four, which FETTEC argues has some advantages, but for the BLHeli ESC, that's not going to be possible. Now, if your BLHeli ESC supports ESC telemetry, you will have a TX or TLM, sometimes it's labeled, and that can go to the TLM/one wire pin on the ESC. It turns out that BLHeli32 ESC telemetry kind of isn't necessary most of the time in this day and age. So you might wire it up or you might not. I've got another video I made talking about why it's not necessary, and I'll put a link to that down in the video description if you want to check that out when you're done here. Finally, we've got current sense, or analog current sense. And this is super important because knowing how many amps your ESC is pulling is very useful information. You can fly without it, and people did for a long time. But if you have the chance to have it, I think you definitely want it. The FETTEC ESC doesn't have a current sense input on its ESC plug. So we're going to have to figure out where to put this. It turns out that in order to get an answer to this question, I had to go to one of the FETTEC devs and ask. Thank you to him for helping me with this question. The reason it's not in the manual is that the FETTEC G4 doesn't support analog current sense today. They are working on a firmware that does support it. They're actually working on a complete rewrite of the FETTEC firmware, but it's not available widely yet. So what you're going to need to do is connect the current sense wire from your BLHeli32 ESC to the SC pad right here on top of the flight controller. And you are going to need to direct solder that. It's not in a plug or anything. And that's not going to work today, but it will work when FETTEC finally releases this firmware that they're working on. If you're really in a hurry and can't wait, I believe they are making alpha builds of the firmware available to the public. You can join the FETTEC Discord server and get that, but it is an alpha build, so you may hesitate to do that since it could have bugs. Next, we got to figure out where to plug that into the FETTEC G4. And it's got a lot of plug headers. It's like, I think you could almost build this whole thing by just plugging stuff in instead of soldering it on. And which of these plugs is the right one? So this little plug here is the RC plug for the receiver. And the plug directly across from it on the underside of the board is the 1 through 4 ESC plug. And if you're building an octo or a hex or any quad with more than 4 motors, this one to the side here is the 4 through 8, or the 5 through 8 motor output. So we're going to plug the ESC into this plug on the underside of the board. And I'm going to double check the wiring against the user manual just to make sure I've got it in the right direction. Hey there folks, Joshua from the future here. I do not have it in the right direction. At the time that I recorded this footage, I was mistakenly thinking that the pinout for the FETTEC G4 and the pinout for the KISS Ultra were the same. They are not the same. This is the KISS Ultra wiring order. Go back to the manual, double check your wiring order, and make sure it's correct. What you see here on screen is not correct. I assume that the plug is the same, but I don't want to accidentally fry this. And that is good there. And then we're going to flip this over and we are going to look for the front facing arrow, which is here. And we're going to make sure that faces the front of the flight controller, if at all possible. Perfect. Next, we're going to wire up our receiver, and I'm not even going to make my own wiring diagram for this because FETTEC's wiring diagrams in their manual are extremely comprehensive. So here's an example for TBS Crossfire. You can put it you can solder it to these pads, or you can put it in this plug if you prefer to have a receiver that unplugs and is easy to disconnect for any reason. For FreeSky S-Bus receivers like the RXSR or the XM Plus, here's how you'll wire it up, and it's pretty much the same. That's one of the beautiful things about KISS is wiring up receivers doesn't have near as much complexity as Betaflight. You'll notice we're missing Immersion RC Ghost and Express LRS. And since the manual doesn't mention the Ghost protocol, I went back and asked the helpful dev here, and he confirmed that you can wire Ghost to the SIG signal wire right here, the same as everything else. Well, since they didn't have a wiring diagram for Ghost in the manual, I went ahead and made it, and here's what that's going to look like. Now, the quadcopter I'm putting this into has the DJI FPV system. So if you're doing an analog setup, once again, we can refer to the excellent diagrams in the FETTEC manual. Let's see if there's any important details here that you don't want to miss. Aha! Here's something that you probably didn't see coming. Both the camera and the video transmitter are getting power from this pad labeled BEC, B-E-C. BEC stands for Battery Eliminator Circuit, and it's a really, really old name in RC circles for a voltage regulator. And that voltage regulator, despite the fact that it says 5 volts here, if we actually look at a separate page of the manual, that voltage regulator can output either 5 volts or 16 volts. So if your camera and your video transmitter take 5 volts, fine. If they take VBAT, well, it's better to give them a filtered output from a voltage regulator rather than raw battery voltage, which can be noisy and make your video worse. So you feed it 16 volts and all is well. But how do you switch it from 5 volts to 16 volts, right? And I went looking, because normally the way that you would do this is with a solder bridge, 2 adjacent solder pads that you make a little solder bridge between, and that tells the flight controller whether it wants 5 volts or VBAT, and there isn't one. And I was so confused. And then I remembered this isn't a stupid old Betaflight flight controller. This is a modern, high-tech KISS FETTEC flight controller. You change it in the software. You change it in the configurator. There's a little pull down, and so you pick 5 volts or 16 volts. So that's cool that you don't have to pull your soldering iron out, but be careful, because if you change it, you'll just immediately fry your 5-volt camera and your 5-volt video transmitter by feeding them 16 volts. So be careful, but also very nice. Finally, in case you missed it in the manual, you have the option of direct soldering your camera and your VTX, or the FETTEC G4 has a plug, which makes it, again, easier. You can have your receiver plug in, you can have your camera and your VTX plug in, and it's easy to disconnect them if you ever need to replace your flight controller or for any other reason. Now, as I said, I'm not using analog on this build. I'm going to be using DJI. So here's how I'm going to wire up my Caddx Vista. We will be going to this plug here, and we will need to set that voltage regulator to 16 volts because the DJI FPV system needs a minimum of 7 volts. So if we forget to change that, it's actually pretty misleading. If you feed a Caddx Vista or a DJI Air unit 5 volts, it will appear to power up, but it kind of just won't work. So make sure you're feeding it 16 volts. And we will not be using the DJI FPV controller. We're going to be using Radiomaster TX16S with Ghost. So we do not need this optional RC connection. That would only be used if you were using the DJI FPV controller. First, I'm going to solder the current wire from the ESC to the SC pad. 5 volt, ground, and signal for the Ghost receiver. It turns out there's a complication with wiring up the Caddx Vista, and this may also be true if you're using any high-powered video transmitter, including analog video transmitters. So the original plan was to use the BEC pad, which would be hooked to the 16-volt voltage regulator on the flight controller. The problem with that is that that regulator is only rated for up to 600 milliamps, and the Caddx Vista will pull as much as 10 watts. 10 watts, the way you do the math is 10 watts divided by 16 volts equals right about 600 milliamps. And if you've done the 1200 milliwatt mod on your Vista, like I definitely haven't done because going over 1 watt wouldn't be legal in the US, then it's going to pull even more amps than that. So frankly, I wouldn't feel comfortable running any voltage regulator right at 100% of its its rating, although FETTEC has assured me that it's okay to run the Vista off that voltage regulator as long as you haven't done the 1200 milliwatt mod. So I won't be using the 16 volt regulator as I originally planned. Well, what does that leave? With the CATX Vista, we can always power it from VBAT. It's good for up to 26 volts. So even though we're running on 6S, we're good to go. We're going to lose some filtering, and that's too bad, but it'll probably still be okay. Got a big old capacitor on here. The question then becomes, where are we going to get VBAT from on this flight controller? And the first place that I notice is right here. This big old plus minus pad, that's actually intended for if you are powering the flight controller directly from, like, just doing a solder a wire to the flight controller, but we're not doing that. This flight controller is getting battery voltage from the ESC plug. So we've actually got spare pads here. We could solder the Vista to that, it would get VBAT, and we'd be fine. The other option we could consider is using this pad here labeled RPIT. RPIT stands for real pit, and it is a pad that outputs battery voltage and is switchable with an aux mode. So you could flip a switch on your controller and you could turn your video transmitter on and off. It should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway. If you're using the DJI controller and the CATX Vista or the DJI Air unit, you don't want to use this, because as soon as you flip that switch and turn your DJI unit off, you won't have control anymore and you won't be able to turn it back on again. But if you're using a different control link like I am, using Immersion RC Ghost, Crossfire Tracer, etc., you could actually use this to switch your Vista on and off in the field, and that's kind of cool because it would keep it from overheating. The only concern would be that these real pit switches also have an amp limit, and if you exceed that amp limit, you'll burn it out. But I think we're going to be okay because 26 volts, 10 watts divided by 26 volts is a smaller number, and it's probably good to go. So I think we're going to use that, and maybe we'll set that up to switch it on and off in the field. That's pretty cool. There's another reason why our original wiring diagram for the CATX Vista isn't going to work, and that is that we originally planned to put it in this plug right here, and that's where the TX and the RX wires are for the CATX Vista to talk to the flight controller, do things like the on-screen display or battery voltage, but they won't reach because I've already cut them to length, and I'm just going to solder them down too, rather than make a plug. I'm not afraid to solder. But where am I going to solder them to? Uh-oh. So we've got TX3 here and RX2 here, but that won't work. We need a TX and an RX, and I fear that the place that's going to have to go is right here. The TX4 and RX4 are the only ones that will reach, and they are in a really precarious location, right next to this component here and these LEDs, and pray for me. I'm going in. Oh, no. I was about to go back in there, and this RX joint is a little bit, it's not the best. I was about to try to go redo it and clean it up. You know what? I'm just going to take it. It's probably fine. All right, that's it. It's wired up. Only thing to do now is smoke check it. But before I apply power, I am going to do a basic test that I do on every build, a basic continuity check. And this is the part of the build where I discover that I had screwed up the ESC plug, that the KISS Ultra and the FETTEC G4 do not share the same pinout. I'm going to let you watch it play out in real time so you can see how important this basic continuity check is. It literally saved me from frying my board. So I'm going to put my multimeter into continuity test mode. That's the little Wi-Fi icon. And I'm going to test first from the positive XT60 prong to this positive VBAT pad on the flight controller. And we should have continuity. There should be continuity between positive through the ESC to the flight controller. Well, that sucks. It's a good thing I checked before I plugged it in. Something was screwed up somewhere. All right, have I reversed it? Surely not. Let's check for continuity between positive and negative. No, none of the above. Okay, well, what have I done wrong? Have I plugged it into the wrong plug? No, I don't think so. If we look at the plug here, VBAT is the pin furthest to this side. Fine. I'm going to just gently probe in here and touch that pin and try not to touch any of the other pins. Is that VBAT? Huh. Is this like protected? Is it input only? Okay, finally, signs of life. Ground, yeah, okay. Ground to ground, the USB port is connected to ground. You would expect that. 2 grounds at the end of the plug. The plug is backwards. I made the cable that I need to make. And now the test that I meant to perform, and I'm glad I performed because I would have fried this flight controller, negative on the XT60 to negative on the flight controller. We want to hear a beep here, and we do. Negative is pinned out correctly, positive to positive. It's pinned out correctly, and the last test is positive to negative to make sure there's not like a cross wire somewhere. There should not be a beep there, and there isn't. Now it is safe to do power on test. I was really about to do this too. I really was. I was just like, yeah, it's good. What couldn't have gone wrong? And I'll just dial in about 16 volts seems good. Over here on my bench power supply. And hold on, let me just clear off my desk there. 3, 2, 1. No smoke, no smoke, no smoke. No smoke. Oh, some LEDs on this flight controller too. Awesome. If you just powered up your FETTEC G4 flight controller and didn't get any smoke, maybe because I saved you from smoking it by telling you that the plug was reversed, or maybe just because you've been following along and everything's working out for you, can I ask you a favor? Would you mind going down right now? Click the like button. It helps other people see this content. If you're enjoying it, if you're learning from it, maybe other people will too. It sure would mean a lot to me. Thanks so much. Next thing we got to do then, after you're done hitting the like button, right? The next thing we got to do is we got to go back to the computer and configure this flight controller. Let's do it. The first thing I always want to do when I'm dealing with a new flight controller is make sure it's on the latest firmware that's available for it. And I have to confess, I'm a little bit confused by the instructions for updating the FETTEC G4. Because what they say to do is connect to the FETTEC configurator and update to the latest firmware. But the FETTEC configurator is specifically for flashing FETTEC ESCs. And normally you just use the regular KISS configurator to configure FETTEC flight controllers. So let's download the FETTEC configurator installer, Win64. And let's go ahead and run this installer and see what it does. Yeah, I'm going to assume this is safe to run and doesn't contain a virus or anything. And sure enough, it says FETTEC ESC configurator. But okay, let's just charge ahead. And let's plug in the flight controller and see what happens. Well, it says COM4. It did pick it up. What happens if I connect? Now, see, it's setting up pass-through to talk to the ESCs, but oh, it's picked up the FETTEC G4. It hasn't picked up any ESCs because we don't have a FETTEC ESC, but okay. So then what if I say remote firmware? Oh, there we go. So we got some firmware here we could choose to flash. We are on firmware version 1.00, but it looks like there is firmware 1.3, and this RC here indicates this is a release candidate. A release candidate is a pre-release version of firmware that is, the devs think it's ready to release, but they're going to put it out there and let you try it, and if everything goes okay, then they'll release it. So by flashing an RC, we're volunteering to be a little bit of a beta tester. But the other thing I see is, well, not beta, because a release candidate is after beta. It's almost release. IJKL, I see. I'm going to flash this one and see what happens. So it looks like they're using the FETTEC configurator app to flash firmware to the flight controller and flash and configure their ESCs. But then once the firmware is on the flight controller, we're going to use the regular KISS configurator GUI to actually do the configuration. Fair enough. If you've never downloaded the KISS configurator GUI before, you can get it from this URL, and links are in the video description down below the video. As always, this one's going to be a little bit different in that it is not a installer. It's not an app that you install. It's just a zip file, and you're going to open the zip file and just put that folder somewhere on your hard drive. Like I have in my OneDrive folder, I have a folder RC Utilities, and I put all that stuff there. Here's the I don't know what version of the KISS GUI that is. I'm just going to delete it. And then I'm going to open that zip file up, and we'll put those side by side so you can see easily. I'm just going to click it and drag it over here onto my hard drive. And then I'll go into that folder, and here is kissgui.exe. Let's run it. And now we're looking at the KISS configurator GUI. Now, if you've configured a KISS flight controller before, many of the things you're going to see here are going to be familiar, but I'm going to assume that a lot of the people watching my channel may be coming from Betaflight and maybe new to some of this stuff, but I will also definitely make sure to call out specific things that are new with the FETTEC flight controller that you may not have seen even if you have used KISS before. So we'll just connect here. No, oh, we got to take it out of pass-through. Looks like I have to power cycle it after flashing it. Connect. There we go. We'll activate. I don't know what what that does. And we will get on with our basic configuration. And the first thing we're going to do is we are going to choose our protocol, which is, for me, it's IRC Ghost. And we'll grab my controller and I'll just confirm that that's working. And I am very happy to see that the FETTEC flight controller powers the receiver from USB, so I don't have to plug in a LiPo while I'm doing this. Very convenient. So we'll go ahead and we'll hit save here down in the lower right. And when we come back, we can go to data output and we can see if the sticks are moving. Oh, I've got the wrong model loaded. So one of the ways that KISS differs from Betaflight is that in KISS, you cannot remap the channel order in the flight controller. You have to do it in your controller. And so I have a separate KISS model on my radio, which has the channels in the correct order for KISS. If you need to do that, you can do that by pressing the model key and then go to the mixer screen. And here in the mixes screen, you basically just rearrange channels 1, 2, 3, 4. You would highlight the one you want to move, long press, move, and then roll it up or down to the channel where you want it to be. I've already done this, so we should be good. Throttle, roll, pitch, and yaw. Fantastic. Next, we'll go back to the configuration screen. As far as PIDs and rates, let's go to user selected presets. Yeah, let's go to user presets, and it'd be nice if you could search this. I don't think you can. I suspect the best preset for us is going to be the Crunked Golden Tune, so I'm looking for the Ks. Crunked is a guy who tunes PID quads, and he's got what they call the Golden Tune, which is supposed to be like a better than default tune. Golden starting point. Here we go. Golden starting point. Fine. We'll hit save there. For the ESCs, we're going to use DShot 600. We could choose to use DShot 1200. I'm pretty sure BLHeli32 supports it, but I'm going to stick with 600 as I'm not 100% confident that it's been like thoroughly vetted to work the best on that ESC. Let's set up our aux functions next. In the radio, I've got this widget set up here to show me all my switch positions. If you want to know more about how I set up all my widgets, I've got a video showing you how to set them up and why I set them up the way that I do, and there's a link in the video description as always. But for arming, I like to use this switch, and it's going to be low. For auto level, we're going to use this switch, and that's going to be channel 6 or aux 2 in the middle position. For buzzer, I like to use the momentary. That's going to be aux 3 in the high position. It would be nice if it automatically picked these up. Like if you could click a detect button and then move a channel to a given position. No? Okay. And then for turtle mode, it's going to be aux 2 in the high position. By the way, if you have never set up a controller to set up your aux modes on the controller, I've got a tutorial about how to do that. It's in the video description. If this is your very first build, you're probably wondering how I got all those switches to move all those channels. The tutorial in the video description will help you with that. Finally, we've got real pit mode, which is going to switch our video transmitter on and off. And I guess we'll need to come up with a switch to control that. I guess what I'd like to do is have it be this switch, which is not currently doing anything. It is near the arm switch. So just as I get to fly or whatever, I can pull that switch and then I can arm. Maybe it's not good to have your finger. Oh, look, I'm accidentally armed. Maybe it should be this switch. Okay, it's going to be this one. So real quick, I'm going to set that up. I'll just press the model key. I will page over to mixes. I'm going to use channel 8 for this. Edit, source, SA. I know I did that quickly. There's a tutorial in the video description if you need to see it go slower. We're going to have that be down as on. So real pit mode is going to be aux 4, and that is high. Neat. All right, and save. Next, we're going to check that the motors are spinning the right direction and in the right place. And even if you're pretty sure you got this right, I always check because you never know, like the one time you screw it up. We're going to do that in the data output tab, and we're going to enable the test function. Oh, and we're going to need to plug in a battery, and we're going to need to make sure our props are off because we're going to spin the motors, right? What we'll do is we will enable the test function. I know what I am doing. And then we'll pick which motor we want to spin. So it's going to be PWM1, which should, according to this diagram, be the front left motor. We will just tick this box here. Oh, enable motors test. Got it. We'll tick this box here. And how do you make the motor actually spin? Well, there's no slider. Like in Betaflight, there's a slider in the configurator. We're just going to do that by raising the throttle. And it is the front left motor. And how about the direction? It is spinning the right direction. Isn't that pleasant? Alrighty. Number 2. Should be the front right motor. It is not. Yeah, okay. And I know for a fact, because I've done this already once on the KISS Ultra, that the others are not correct either. Here's how we're going to sort this out. Number 3 was the front right, and number 4 was the back right. I'm going to keep this handy. I'm going to go back to the configuration tab, and I'm going to go to the motor output mapping. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scroll through these options until I find one that matches this layout. I think the easiest way to do that is going to be to select this. And then can I just use the down arrow? Yeah. So I want PWM1 in the upper left, 2 in the lower left. Nope, close. 3 in the upper right, 3, 4. There we go. Betaflight 180 CCW CCW. I confess the reason that I have to do this is I don't have my ESC installed the right way around. And if you watch my perfect freestyle build where I build this quad with Betaflight, you'll see why. But I'll go ahead and save that. And then we will go back to data output. And we will double check that. Motor 1, front left. Motor 2, back left. Motor 3, front right. Motor 4, back right. Excellent. Next, we're going to go to the Advanced tab, and there are a couple of things we need to change here. Oh, the first one is we need to set this adjustable BEC. Do we? I don't think we're actually using the BEC. No, we're not using the 5 volt or 16 volt because we don't have an analog VTX or camera, and the Vista is wired to VBAT. So we don't need to worry about that, but this is where we would change that if we needed to. This is where we would set up smart audio or tramp protocol if we wanted to remote control our VTX using those, analog VTX. Buzzer emulation, we want that. Buzzer emulation is for quads that don't have a dedicated buzzer. It makes the motors go beep, beep, beep instead of the buzzer, which you don't have. So definitely turn that on. Oh, and advanced serial configuration. We are going to need to change some of these things. So we have the DJI video transmitter, the DJI Vista, on serial 4. And we're going to change that to DJI MSP OSD. That is it. We're not using any of these other serial things except receiver on serial 2, which is the default. And we're not doing any of these. There's one more thing we need to do. If we go back to the FETTEC G4 manual, you'll see that they label UART4 as used for the onboard OSD. But we hooked the Caddx Vista up to UART4 so it could talk to the flight controller. And the only reason we did that is because that's where the pads were within reach of our wires. There's no other reason why we had to do that. But UART4 is not actually going to work unless we disable the onboard OSD. Now the good news is we don't need the onboard OSD because it's only for analog builds anyway, so that's nice. But if you were using analog, you wouldn't want to use UART4 for anything else. And the way that we disable it is as follows. Here on the top side of the flight controller is the onboard OSD jumper right here. And as the manual says here, we will bridge those two pads together to deactivate the onboard OSD and activate TX4 and RX4. We'll have to go back to the bench and take care of that real quick. The last thing I got to do is set up my rates. And if this was a Betaflight quad, I just know what Betaflight rates I like to use. Interestingly, Betaflight has the ability to emulate KISS rates. So if you're coming from KISS to Betaflight, you can just put your rates in directly. I don't think KISS has that capability. So instead, I used a rate converter, and it's pretty clunky, but it got me pretty close. I'll put a link to the rate converter down in the video description as well if you're doing the same thing. But I'm just going to plug in the KISS Ultra and grab my rates off of them there. Well, now all I got to do is put this back together, and then I can take it out and fly it. In the meantime, if you want to check out me flying the biggest competitor to this, the KISS Ultra, I've got a video where I freestyled the KISS Ultra and tried it out. My friend Phantom FPV, he's got his own YouTube channel, and he built his freestyle quad with KISS Ultra, and he sent it to me to try out. So I'll want to put that in a card up in the corner of the screen, and you can check that out, as well as all this other stuff that you might want to check out, including my Patreon. Yeah, I do this for a living, so you could check that out if you feel like today's the day that you want to start supporting me. Or, if today's not the day, keep watching content. Hopefully someday will be the day. Happy flying.